I totally love it. I love working with clay. I love the fact that you produce something completely unique and handmade, and there's a lot of the soul of the potter in that piece.
To me, pottery is definitely, it's functional, and I would hesitate to say that like something being sculptural is like a function. Like pottery is very much like, you know, tablewares, at least to me.
Clay started to interest me in my 30s, and I really wanted to learn how to throw on the wheel. So I started to attend some evening classes. And very soon bought my own wheel, or my father bought it for me, bless him. And then I could practice a lot more. So it was really wheel throwing that attracted me to clay. Llangaro was said to be the finest, just because of the whiteness of the grain and just the incredible whiteness then of the body. When William Billingsley came here to make the porcelain, his aspirations were to make the finest porcelain in the world, and he achieved that here. It is incredibly translucent, incredibly white, and the surface, once glazed, is also beautiful to paint.
Pottery making has impacted my life in a profound way. Having trained at a young age to be an engineer and then strayed from that path towards a more creative kind of profession. It's a wild experience, and I'm sure any self-employed maker will tell you the same thing. The challenges that you face are unique to that style of working. Initial inspiration is pretty much just the relaxing element of it. It's that kind of mindful, zen kind of state of mind that you go into. For me now, it's definitely a lot about flow, but that kind of comes with more practice.
The whole thing, from preparing, wedging the clay and to sitting at the wheel and then eventually turning a piece, is a process that I love. I find it very soothing. I think it's quite a mindful activity. I love the fact that you produce something completely unique and handmade. I thoroughly enjoy the process. I've always been a maker. I love to make, but clay, it is such a flexible medium. It's a very expressive medium, and I love that aspect. That it can be quite sculptural, but functional as well at the same time.
When you're making pots, you will start, inevitably, off of the wheel without any clay, and you'll sketch up some kind of design. I think for me, the sketching part is definitely a very rough part. It's kind of rough and ready. Then you prepare the clay, put it on the wheel. At that point, everything starts to kind of, take off. So throwing leads to then turning the pot, which is where you trim off any excess clay, which can all then be reused, so that's really cool. You then take that pot that you've made and fire it once. That's called a bisque firing. From that point then, you glaze, which is its whole own school, and then you do the final firing. And that will leave you with kind of a finished pot, really. There you go. That's what it looks like at the end, so.
There's the touch of the potter on the piece. in every stage of the making. It's so different to, you know, everything that we see that is mass produced and doesn't have any heart in it really. I've worked with all the clays, and then I started to work with porcelain, and the Nantgarrow porcelain, which is the most difficult clay I've ever worked with. It's very non-plastic, but the results are worth it because it's quite beautiful. The most memorable day was the day that we heard that we had matched the recipe exactly for the Nantgarrow porcelain, and we had recreated the same recipe some 200 years later.
A lot of what I'd be inspired by are people that would go out and gather their own materials, especially using those materials cleverly to kind of, you know, create glazes and clay bodies. That's what I find particularly interesting. So my inspiration generally comes from them. I would find myself drawn to kind of more natural outcomes. So nature, I suppose, is definitely an inspiration as well.
I do believe that when you're working with clay and other mediums, that it does help your personal growth and reduces the stress that we all experience in our everyday lives, and has a very calming effect. I was in a very difficult time of my life where my daughter had been born quite severely disabled, and it was very distressing for myself and the whole family, and so I took it up to help me to deal with all of that. It has helped me enormously, saved me really.
Pottery has a place in sort of a therapy-like process just due to the repetitive nature of it. There's an attempt, a failure, and a repeat. There is this process by which failure is this encourageable outcome, because the more you fail, the more you learn, and eventually you'll end up being able to throw things that you couldn't previously, and it can take days or it can take weeks. And I think something like that, it can give you a feeling of worth, which is important. If you have that feeling of worth, you feel satisfied with what you're doing, then you will inevitably just lead a happier life. The human form, it's the goal really. If you're making something that is supposed to be used, it should be considered against those criteria. How does it fit in someone's hand? How does the rim touch your lip? These sorts of things are vital for making something that is not just beautiful but useful and a pleasure to use.
We use it every day, and it's a tactile thing, so we touch it, we hold it, and I feel there is that deep connection then to, you know, the very early days of pottery where it was used for cooking and still is.
If something is beautiful and you wish to look at it, then that's all you need to know. I think art particularly could do with some redefining, because in my opinion, what is now considered art is more geared towards influence, politics perhaps, whereas something craft or artisan would be much less to do with that kind of meaningfulness.
Sometimes whether you make something which is functional or whether it's sculptural, and then somehow that elevates you to a different level. And I do both, and I find them both as interesting. In the whole process, you will go from making, drying, firing, and then glazing. So you've got all those different processes, And then of course you can also use on-glaze enamels to paint on that surface afterwards.
There is usually an element of chance. The goal is to reduce that, at least in my opinion. I'd like to be able to have a consistent outcome, especially when making tablewares. But there is always an element of chance. There are multiple things that can change. I think if you can find a workshop where you're able to try it out, those sorts of things can be really, really wonderful and just fun. You know, it doesn't have to be deep and meaningful. Getting messy, playing with mud, that is kind of the main element of pottery.
We're very lucky here that we have a lot of visitors come through the door. And we give these visitors short talks on the making process and what we find is exciting about it. And most people that come here say that our enthusiasm for the material comes across really well. And we always try and encourage people to come and join one of our classes and have a go themselves.
Pottery is an ancient art form. Since the beginning, I don't think it's going away. I think you may see fluctuations in its popularity, but as a thing that people can own and try and engage with, there is not much else like it. So I can see ups and downs, but overall, I'm not worried about those things.